Ted, you know, we're going to jump right into it. I do believe we have an email from David. And David, if I had my brights on and it blinded another driver, they hit a deer, would I be liable for their injuries and car damage?
David, that's a very interesting question. You know, we have a lot of deer out on the road. You got to always be safe anytime you're driving, especially when you get into the fall winter time frames. Potentially, but I think it's going to be very difficult in a case like this, because and we've had a lot of people call us where they've been in accidents, single car accidents with a deer, and they want to know what their rights are and their responsibilities are. As a general rule, you cannot sue deer. They don't carry very good coverage.
That might be a good business angle for some insurance companies to insure these deer.
It could be, but it's not going to work out very well. You know, the only way that this potentially could have some angle on liability, you know, if you have your brights on and it's a time where you know you're passing a car and you should have dimmed them down, that could have been the failure to use reasonable care under the circumstances. But then you're going to also have to have causation, that somehow that distracted the driver or prevented them from seeing them, and then ultimately that led to that collision with the deer. But there's a lot of other things in play there, especially when you're dealing with a deer that comes out. So I think the answer is possibly, but very, very unlikely. And that's why it's also important to carry comprehensive coverage on your vehicle, so that when you do have those unfortunate situations where you run into a deer, you have coverage on your own policy to help pay for that property damage, because otherwise you're going to be looking at a very, very large bill.
Well, you know, under our current scheme right now, also, Ted, you've got personal injury protection as well.
Yes.
And so in the event
that's going to apply either way.
Right. So if you're the person who got blinded and hit a deer and run into the ditch, your own policy is going to kick in, because currently in the state of Florida, we are a no-fault state. And you are afforded personal injury protection benefits under your current policy up to $10,000. Typically speaking, they pay 80/20.
Yes, 80%, and then basically like a 20% copay.
They can pay some lost wages. And you know, Ted, a lot of times we get asked the question, why is my insurance company paying? And even though we say we live in a no-fault state, people they get very confused. They either think that they have no claim whatsoever against the other person because we're a no-fault state, or they're confused as to why their insurance is paying and stopping at $10,000. So, you know, there's been a few clients that have come in probably the last couple months that have raised this issue and said, I didn't know I had a claim because we're a no-fault state.
Now, I've actually had a couple people tell me that the law enforcement on the scene told them that they were not going to write a ticket and that they were not going to do anything else because we're a no-fault state, which is, you know, as I tell people all the time, yes, we're a no-fault state, but that does not mean what it sounds like it means. All that the no-fault aspect of the law means is that we're all required to carry PIP, personal injury protection, which is the benefits that Chris just discussed, that allows you to get coverage up to $10,000, whether it be for your medical expenses or potentially for lost wages. It can cover that as well. And that's something that kicks in immediately if there's an accident in an automobile. But that does not mean that you do not have a claim against the person that caused the accident. And that also doesn't mean that law enforcement cannot cite someone if they violated, failed to yield the right-of-way, ran a red light, what have you. If they violated the rules of the road under Florida statutes, they can be cited even though we're a no-fault state.
So Ted, we have rules of the road violations, and then we have citationable rules of the road violations. And so just understand, just because an officer does not issue a ticket, some type of traffic citation, does not mean that you don't have a claim. Does not mean that you can't pursue your claim. But even though we are a no-fault state, that no-fault only deals with your medical attention up to $10,000 originally.
Right, because when you have an accident, you do have a claim against the person that caused the accident, but that liability policy of that other individual will not pay as you go. So for example, you need to have treatment when you've been in an accident, because the most important thing is to try to get back to the position you were before that accident. And to do that, you got to get medical attention. And to do that medical attention, it's got to get paid for. And so what the PIP does is it helps start that and make sure that that gets paid just like health insurance. And when you're in an auto accident, PIP or no-fault benefits are your primary form of insurance until they exhaust. But it's also important and critical to make sure you give all of your medical providers any health insurance you have, so they either bill that as secondary or they have that on file if and when your PIP exhausts. And I have a number of people, and even some medical providers, that will try to get folks to say, I don't want to have my health insurance bill because this was an auto accident.
Right.
Or they'll say, I want to put this on the other person's policy and you need to bill them. That's not the way a liability policy works. It will only resolve once and only one time at the end of the case. And you need to make sure you know what your injuries are and the extent of them before you resolve that claim.
But Ted, along that same vein, a lot of individuals, they're like, well, why do I have to file it on my own Blue Cross Blue Shield
Right.
policy or United Health or whatever they have, or TRICARE? And that's to their benefit.
Exactly.
No matter if you got sick for something that's just of nobody's fault, or if you got involved in an auto accident, your health care provider is going to provide you health care insurance coverage,
Right.
assuming that you have it, right?
And there's huge benefits there.
Right. Now, we can jump into that too, because what will happen is they will pay for your bills as you incur them and as they stack up against you and you're not sent to a credit bureau.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of your case, you have what this fancy word of called subrogation, and they have a lien against your case and they can subrogate it against any funds that you have. Now, you're like, well, man, how do I do all that? And but there's been a lot of individuals where their insurance company has paid. They came to us because they got frustrated with trying to do it by themselves, and they would have made some very costly decisions had they you settled their case, because there's a big lien out there
Right.
with their health insurance company.
Right, because the most important thing at the end of the day is what you net at the end of the day. And so you want to get as much money as you can from the at-fault party to be fully compensated. At the same time, you want to keep your medical expenses down as low as possible so that you
Right.
can be compensated for those non-economic damages, the pain and suffering, the loss of enjoyment of life, all the things that goes along with recovering from an automobile accident. That health insurance has contractual adjusted rates that they pay. That's not the sticker price or the retail price that
Right.
you would get if you just went in without health insurance. So it's important to get those negotiated rates that the big insurance companies have to press down what you have to pay for those medical expenses. Now, if and when you settle the case, they do have what's called a right of subrogation, which means they get reimbursed out of the settlement proceeds. But at the end of the day, that's better for you because what they paid is less than what you would have had to have paid if you tried to pay for it
Right.
on your own without going through the contractual adjustments. Because health insurance, as anybody has seen on their explanation of benefits or explanations of review that they get with their payments, there's a large percentage of a bill that gets written off that the insurance company doesn't pay, that you don't pay. You do have your copay or deductible, but the insurance company will pay an agreed upon rate, and a large portion of the bill will get written off. Now, they don't obviously have a right of subrogation or a right to be reimbursed for what got written off.
Right.
It's just for what they actually paid. So it's important to get those bills down as low as possible.
That is a lot to digest.
Yes, it is.
Now,